The Achilles is a rare dropship that dates back to the early days of the Star League. It is the only surviving relative of the League's massive battlecruisers, which did not survive the fighting of the early succession wars. The Achilles-class dropship was designed specifically to engage targets in space and is capable of outmaneuvering most heavy fighters in dropship. Unlike other aerodynes, the Achilles does not have wings or any other lifting surfaces, limiting it to operations in space. These craft are very rare because few construction facilities have been able to build or maintain them since the end of the Star League. The design of the Achilles is relatively simple. The ship masses 4,500 tons, with over half of the ship taken up by its extremely powerful CEVEX-12 interplanetary fusion drive, which provides up to 6 Gs of thrust. The ship has often been described as a well-armed fusion drive, but this high-powered drive system has its problems. When the drives are operating at full thrust, more than 4 Gs, the engine begins to shudder and to vibrate intensely. These vibrations become unbearable after prolonged use, and have caused ammunition-dependent weapon systems to misfeed. The chance of such misfeeds has been estimated at roughly 3% per minute that the vibrations continue. Once a misfeed occurs, the weapon system must be manually cleared and reset. Incredibly well armed, the Achilles was the closest thing to a warship in the technological decline of the succession wars. 2 PPCs and 2 LRM-20s, plus 2 large and medium lasers mounted in the nose, allow the craft to unleash blistering fire upon enemies in its forward arc. Each wing mounts a single PPC and autocannon 20, supported by a pair of autocannon 5, LRM-20s and medium lasers facing forward, with another PPC, autocannon 10, large laser and another 2 medium lasers pointing rearwards. Directly aft, the Achilles mounts a third AC-20, 2 more medium lasers and an LRM-10. 4 tons of reloads for each of the smaller autocannons, 8 for the mammoth AC-20s, and a total of 17 tons of long-range missiles allow the craft to engage seemingly at will. The interior of the Achilles is different from most other ships. Instead of having a few large decks, the vessel is constructed with many long and narrow decks. The 3 decks at the front of the ship are almost exclusively filled with long-range tracking and navigational systems and the forward weapons bay. Except for the narrow accessways, there is little room to walk on these decks. Just behind this section are the crew decks, which contain the quarters for the ship's 60 personnel. Also located here are the recreation room, mess hall and med bay, laundry and waste processing. Behind the crew section is a large area for the ship's fuel tankage, the port and starboard weapons bay, and ammunition storage. Beyond this is the control deck, with the ship's bridge, the engineering room, the main computer system, and the communications gear. The ship's massive fusion drive makes up the bulk of the rest of the ship. Located on either side of the engine core is a small craft bay with a pair of small craft cubicles in each. The normal small craft complement are 2 airspace fighters and 2 small craft. The massively armed Achilles often deploys in the vanguard of planetary assault fleets, as well as the orbital defense forces of key systems. In both situations, a group of fighters usually accompanies the Achilles. The ship's high maneuverability makes it an excellent anti-fighter ship. In defensive operations, a common tactic is to lead a fighter group straight into an enemy fleet, headed towards the weakest ship. The enemy fighters usually attempt to stop the attacking Achilles, only to be engaged from behind by the fighters following the dropship. In an offensive role, the ship usually follows the assaulting fighter group and hits enemy vessels engaged with friendly fighters. With its tremendous firepower, the Achilles can take out enemy fighters one at a time, or engage in a firefight with enemy dropships. The Achilles also carries a full platoon of Marines, who occupy a well-equipped barrack in the center of the ship. These Marines board disabled ships via a pair of combat shuttles that occupy the small craft bays. The Achilles also carries a pair of aerospace fighters in addition to the shuttles, as already mentioned. The Draconis Combine maintained the largest quantity of these Achilles-class dropships, but lost their Achilles production facility when the planet of Shoila fell to the clan Smoke Jaguar. The loss of this key center devastated the Combine's aerospace industry and has resulted in a number of new developments away from the clan lines. Variants. The upgrade. Surprisingly, the Capel military has begun to deploy a refitted version of the Achilles alongside its new Quanti and Longwang craft. Somewhat of a shock given that no Capellan or Merrick facility produced the Achilles previously. An upgraded version first emerged from the facilities of Rushmore Owen Incorporated above Capella in 3055. Replacing all the standard heatsinks with double heatsinks, the upgrade Achilles has greatly improved endurance. The PPCs and large lasers are upgraded to extended range models. The standard mediums are replaced with medium pulse lasers, and Artemis IV FCS is added to each LRM launcher. The 4 AC-5s have been dropped entirely and replaced with 2 Gauss rifles and 5 tons of reloads. The 2 AC-10s share 5 tons of shells, the 3 AC-20s share 6 tons of shells, and a combined 15 tons of missiles are shared by the LRM. These upgrades lowered the previous amount of cargo space to 122 tons. The 3088 upgrade. This version of the Achilles was overseen by the Draconis Combine Admiralty and carries double heatsinks. It also carries 4 heavy PPCs, 6 LRM-20s with Artemis IV FCS, 3 ER large lasers, twin ER PPCs, 4 ER medium lasers, 5 Gauss rifles, and 2 Ultra AC-20s. It also has a bay for a single squad of battle armor, but the main piece of equipment is a naval sea-free system that coordinates fire among friendly naval units. Its cargo is now lowered to only 103 tons. The history. Dating back to the middle of the Reunification War, 2577 to 2597, the Achilles, 2582, was one of the Star League's primary assault dropship. As one of the first assault ships introduced to Battletech, it set the scene and practically defined the type along with the Avenger. Though the Intruder and Fortress were also described as assault ships, they never inspired imitators in the same way. Even the lightweight Avenger remains an afterthought in many minds, leaving the Achilles the defining example of what an assault dropship is. Produced at several locations across the Sphere by the Star League, the Achilles would see service with 2 main other ships, the Pentagon, 2540 to 2623, and Titan. It is important to note the difference between the 3. As a spheroid ship, the Pentagon is primarily a defensive platform that is suited to anti-aircraft work. In comparison, the aerodyne nature of the Achilles allows it to concentrate more weapons on a single ship, making it more potent as an anti-ship platform. On the other hand, the Titan is carrier and command ship. It is not lacking the Achilles' small craft and marine capability, singling the Achilles out as the picket ship. This was an age of warships, which could basically ignore the Achilles. Besides the Titan's aerospace fighters, the primary role for all 3 dropships was to be supporting aerospace fighter strikes or defending against them. In this role, they would provide electronic support, heavy firepower, or target other dropships directly. If done properly, aerospace superiority would be achieved and the battle could be won without the SLDF warships firing a shot. The First Succession War knocked out all of the Achilles production lines, with the exception of Galileo instruments on Schuyler in the Draconis Combine. This meant everyone else had to maintain their surviving ships with whatever leftover Star League supplies they could get. By the end of the Second Succession War, warships were essentially extinct, and the Achilles represented the most capable of the combat dropships surviving. Later Succession War tactics saw Achilles primarily acting as heavy escorts for fighter groups. With assault dropships rare, the Achilles was able to run riot in an anti-shipping role. Hostile Memory Corps and Operation Reviver was the period of renewal for the Achilles. It wasn't just the closest the successor states had to the warships of the clans, it was the closest they had to clan heavy Omnifighters. Unfortunately, Shiloh was captured by Clan Smoke Jaguar in the opening waves of the invasion, leaving the Inner Sphere without a source for its more capable assault dropship. Enter Rushmore Owens Incorporated of Capella and its upgraded version of the Achilles-class dropship. Now, the story of the Achilles reaches an interesting point. The Inner Sphere is upgrading their old Achilles to the 3055 standard. But at the same time, the Smoke Jaguars were continuing production of a 2582 model on Shiloh, confirming clan usage of assault dropships. It creates an interesting situation of the clans using the 2582 Achilles from Star League and Smoke Jaguar sources. Later, we see those clans outside the sphere using the old version, while those clans that had absorbed Inner Sphere states, and after 3055, had access to their subjects' upgraded Achilles. In any case, by 3060, Shiloh was in combined hands again, and soon upgraded to 3055 standards, meaning literally all successor state Achilles would be the 3055. Probably the most notable feature of the Achilles at this time was that its armor began to look substandard. While the 3050 generation of new assault dropships looked to the Achilles for inspiration, those that followed pushed new boundaries. The 3070s saw a generation of heavy assault ships that reduced the Achilles from the gold standard to the bare minimum. The Achilles was still valuable, but less so in a frontline role.